Balancing act. Man, how do you keep your life in balance? What happens when life gets chaotic? And especially, like I said, this time of year, things get crazy. I don't know if some of you know this, some of you don't know this. My wife, Heather, and I, we've been married for 15 years. And in that 15-year period of marriage, Heather and I have managed to make 5 other people that live with us, and we call them our kids. And I brought a picture of our family. This is our family here. We took this picture on vacation a couple of weeks ago. This is our family it's actually in Seaside. We were on vacation in Destin, and we kind of traveled down to have dinner. And so these are our 5 kids: 2 boys, 3 girls, and I love it. I'm the dad with the big family, and we're that family, with the kids traveling everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And people ask me from time to time, they come up and they're like, "Wow, wait, you got this huge family. How did you end up with 5 kids?" And so I explained to them that when a man loves a woman and when a woman loves a man, certain things happen, and sometimes they happen with great frequency. And so you can't. Anyway, too much detail. Sorry about that. Anyway, so this is my family, and so 2 boys, 3 girls, and it's awesome. Like I said, I never dreamed of being the dad with 5 kids, but here I am. This was taken just a few weeks ago. We were on vacation in Destin, and then just a day or so after this, we left and we drove home. And so it was a 13-hour drive. We drove all the way straight through from Destin to Tulsa. We had gas station stops and a drive-through at McDonald's stop, and that was it. We drove straight through 13 hours, Destin to Tulsa, which if you have never driven 13 hours in a car with 5 kids, one of which being a small baby, you got to do it. It's so much fun. You have not lived until you have tried that. So anyway, that's our family. So right now, obviously, for me, and you may not have 5 kids, but you kind of know how this goes. Like right now, things get crazy, things get wild, things start to get really stressful, and you're just running from this practice to that practice and trying to juggle all the different activities that's going on in everybody's family and just all the stuff that's happening. You're trying to keep it all, all the plates spinning and so forth. And so sometimes you kind of get a little more easily frustrated and angered than maybe you naturally would. About a week ago, maybe a little bit more than a week ago, 3 of my kids were challenged or nominated for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I think probably everyone in the world knows what the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is. If you don't know what the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is, just meet me after the service. I need to tell you about this thing called the internet. It's amazing that we have. And so 3 of my kids were nominated for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, and so I came home from work, and I'd been traveling that week, and so been kind of a long week already, been traveling a lot, and came home, went to work, had a long day at work, and then football practice with the boys and taking everybody home and all this kind of stuff. And so I walk in the door, and Heather's got these ice bucket things all set up, and so she explains, we're going to do the Ice Bucket Challenge. And so we go outside, and so we attempted to do the Ice Bucket Challenge. And anyways, I thought it would be fun to just kind of show you my family's attempt at the Ice Bucket Challenge. So check this out.
I'm Lucy, and I am doing the Ice Bucket Challenge, and I was nominated by Savannah Fierce and Emily Montgomery. Go, Elliot.
Your name. Who are you?
Elliot George. I was challenged by Micah Cruz.
I was challenged by, my name is Liz, and I was challenged by Eliza. This is gonna be...
That is slow.
Mom, you're gonna freeze.
Sit down, Elliot. Sit down. That went good. Go sit down, Elliot.
No, I don't. No.
Come on. Ellie, you have to.
No.
I am not. Sue, it's okay.
Stop, Francis.
Hey, you were challenged. Sit down, please.
No.
This is going to be the longest video and the most boring video ever.
Elliot.
Elliot.
I am not going to do it.
Yeah, that's my family. So what you don't see in the video is that right after we made that part of the video, all hell broke loose in our family. I was yelling at Heather. She was yelling at me. The kids were yelling at each other. Ice buckets were being thrown across the backyard. Heather almost threw my phone out into the backyard. It was crazy. We're yelling at each other. And while we're yelling at each other, I'm thinking to myself, and this is all for a great cause. So while we're screaming and yelling at each other, I found myself, and I wonder if you've ever had one of these moments, I found myself yelling and all of this, and I'm thinking to myself, what are you so angry about? Why are you so frustrated? This is such really a small thing, and I won't go into all the details of kind of what set the whole thing off, but it was nothing. Just a small thing. What is it that I'm so frustrated by? Why am I so easily angered? And as I started to calm down and think, I came to the conclusion that I've been traveling a lot. I've been doing a lot at work, meeting, and then going from meetings into football practices, and then from football practices right to home, and then once you get home, it's time for dinner, and then everybody into bed, and it's just crazy, and then you go to sleep, and you wake up, and you do the whole thing over again. And I was living my life, I realized, on edge. You know, I think a lot of us live our lives on edge. We live on the edge of disaster at any given point. In fact, it doesn't take all that much to knock us off our game. For us to just get frustrated, to get angry. You may not express it the same way that I do, but it doesn't take much for so many of us to just lose it because our lives are so stretched, so maxed, so busy that it doesn't take much to knock us off our game because we're living on the edge. You know, it's not really that difficult for me to take, 40 steps in one direction. It's not hard for you. For most of us, it's pretty easy to just walk, 40 feet or so in a straight line. That's not that difficult. But you put me on a beam. In fact, out at Dry Gulch, we have this thing we call the Sky Trail. Maybe you've been out there. It's this like giant erector set looking thing that you can put a harness on and go up and walk around on there across these like 6-inch beams. Try to walk across one of those beams and just notice how much more difficult it is to keep your balance. Why? Because you're living on the edge. And that's what happens when we live our lives on the edge, when our schedules are so maxed, when our financial situation is so leveraged, when everything is just pushed right to the limit. It's easy to lose your balance. And that's how a lot of us go through life. We go through seasons of life like this. Some of us, we've been living this way for days. Some of us, it's weeks. Some of us, it's months and years. We've been living this life, this overscheduled, overconnected, over-leveraged life where we're just pushing. And we're stressed, and we're frustrated, and we're resentful half the time because we're pushing, and we're pushing, I would argue, too much. See, the antidote for this overstressed, overworked, overscheduled life that so many of us live is rest. We live in a rest-starved society, don't we? I mean, I don't think there's ever been a busier group of people than the people that exist in America 2014. There are no busier group of people than what we have today. We're just so busy. There's constantly emails, constantly texts coming in, constantly assignments to get done, things that we have to keep up with, things that we have to take care of, practices to attend, events to be a part of, parents to take care of, kids to take care of, schedules to keep, meetings to attend, all kinds of things that we have to do. We're overworked, overmaxed, all these things, and many of us are in debt, and we're resentful because we're overworked and we don't have the rest that we need. And rest is the antidote to the situation that we're in. Rest, and we're a rest-starved society. Fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say on the subject of rest. In fact, the Bible talks all about rest. If you read through the Bible, beginning to end, cover to cover, what you're going to find is that the subject of rest, the idea of rest, the thought of rest comes up over and over and over again. God talks about rest. In fact, when you go back to the beginning and you read in Genesis, what you find is that God said, we read that when God created the earth, and he created it in 6 days, we read that story. It says on the seventh day, God rested. Why did he do that? It wasn't because he was tired. is because he was trying to tell us that rest is important. And so when we read through the scriptures, one of the things we find is that rest is a theme. And one of the most interesting stories of rest that we find in the Bible is found in the Gospel of Luke. Luke was a physician. Luke was not one of the 12 disciples. So we got Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. That's Luke's gospel. Luke was a physician, and he became a follower of Jesus. He was a friend of the Apostle Paul, who you've heard of. But Luke was a guy who went around and he interviewed people. He got different eyewitness accounts, and he wrote down these stories of what Jesus did and some of the things that happened in the very first church. And then he was writing all these things down because he also wrote the book of Acts. And so when you're reading through Luke, one of the interesting things that we find is that Luke records some stories that nobody else records. And one of the interesting stories that he records is so beneficial to where so many of us are at in this overworked, overscheduled society that we live in. One of the things that he writes down is this story of of Mary and Martha. And we find this in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10. So if you have a Bible, maybe an iPhone, iPad, something like that, you want to follow along with me, you can. We're going to be looking at Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. But we're looking at the story of these two women, Mary and Martha. Now, you've probably heard of these ladies before because their brother is kind of a famous guy. Their brother is Lazarus, and Lazarus was a guy that Jesus raised from the dead. And so here's what it says. It says that while they were traveling, who's they? That's Jesus and his disciples. So Jesus and his disciples are traveling. They entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Now, so Jesus is traveling along, and he's got his disciples, and they're coming into her village. And one of the things that was kind of customary in this time was that the people of this era, hospitality was a huge deal. And so as somebody would kind of come into your city or your town, it was up to the people of that village, of that town, to take care of whoever came in, especially if these were your friends. And so Jesus was friends with Mary and Martha. They were good friends because Jesus was friends with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. And so he was coming into town. Of course, he was going to visit their home. And so as he comes into the village, he's visiting their home. And it says this. It says, she had a sister named Mary who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So Mary's listening. Jesus shows up, and he's having a conversation. He's teaching inside their home. And Mary is sitting down listening to Jesus talk, but Martha is distracted by her many tasks. Now, maybe you've read the Bible before. And maybe you've kind of come to the conclusion that, the Bible, I know I'm supposed to read it, but every time I kind of pick it up and I read it, I just have trouble seeing how it applies to me. I don't understand it. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I just want to challenge you as we walk through this story. Just see how much this story reads our mail for where we live today, because this is our lives. We are distracted by many tasks. I think a lot of us, that's how we live. We live distracted lives. The phone buzzes. Let me take that. We got an email. Oh, I need to check that out. Oh, somebody's mentioning me on social media. I mean, any little thing comes up, we're distracted. We're distracted by all the little things that go on. Some of you can't make it through a dinner without looking at your phone. You can't. It's been a long time since you've gone an hour where you've just set your phone down, myself included. It's difficult to put the phone down, to put the technology down, and just exist with the people that you have chosen to live your life with. It's difficult for you to do that because you're distracted. You live a distracted life. And as I read through this, and as I'm studying for this and thinking about this message and what I'm going to share with all of you, I was just thinking about this, and this is the conclusion that I came to, and I hope that you here and at Glimpool and online, you'll come to the same conclusion. Is that I don't want to come to the end of my life and realize that I've been distracted from the things that are most important. I don't want to come to the end of my life and say, I know I didn't really have much of a relationship with my kids, but at least my house was really clean. I know that marriages 1, 2, and 3, those didn't work out so well, but I had some really great cars, and I had some money in the bank, and I had a nice house, at least that. I don't want to come to the end of my life and find out that the things that I've chosen to spend the most of my time on were the things that weren't all that important. I don't want to come to the end of my life and say, I know my kids wondered why I spent so much time prepping for their events, their birthday parties and things. I know they didn't understand all that, but at least I got a lot of pins on Pinterest when I put it up there. Seriously, how much time do we spend on stuff that is meaningless? How much time do we spend putting on events for people that are supposed to be right next to us, like our kids, that really aren't for our kids, that they're more for how everyone else around us is going to respond to that birthday party that we've been putting on, or that whatever it is that we're working on? We're working on things for other people who exist only on the internet so that they can be really pleased and really excited about the things that we've made. Oh, look at how beautiful your home is and all this. Who cares? We're distracted by stuff that just doesn't matter. And what we tell ourselves is this. We tell ourselves that, rest is a good thing. And I know I'm stressed, and I know I'm easily frustrated, and I know I kind of lose it every now and again, but I'll rest whenever I can. After I get all this stuff done, after I complete everything, after the house is exactly as it should be, after everybody looks just like they should, after everything's perfect, then and only then will I take a break. What we've convinced ourselves of is that rest is a luxury. But here's the reality. Rest is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Rest is a necessity. God said, rest. Whenever God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, the top 10 things that were the most important to God, it's amazing. Things like don't murder and don't steal and don't lie, all stuff like that you should not do. Honor your father and mother. One of the things that he included in there was rest. Rest. You have to rest. But many of us treat rest like it's just a luxury, like it's something that when we complete everything, we'll eventually get to. And some of you've been living your lives for a long season. You've been going a long time. And the people around you are stressed, you're making everybody else stressed, and you've told yourself that one day you'll be able to take some time. One day you'll be able to relax a little bit. You convinced yourself that rest is just a luxury, that it's not something you have to have, it's just something that would be nice one day. But God says it's something that you need. And here's why. Even if you don't believe in it, in God, maybe you kind of say, these are neat stories, and I've heard, I grew up around the Bible and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if I believe any of that. So you may kind of set some of the God said stuff aside, but let me just tell it to you like this. Here's another reason why you should rest. Just set God aside if you want to. Here's another reason. When you don't rest, everybody suffers. Everybody suffers. You're not as creative when you don't rest. You're on edge when you don't rest. You're more irritable when you don't rest. You're more angry when you don't rest. You don't think as clearly. You make bad decisions. You're more susceptible to disease. Guys, these are scientifically proven facts. When you don't rest, you're not as good. And when you're not as good, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you. You may not believe in God. You may have your questions about God, all those kinds of things. But this is proof that rest is a necessity. And some of you are not getting enough rest in your life. I'm not just talking about sleep. I'm talking about finding time to unplug, to replenish, to restore yourself, to get to a place where you can recharge the battery. Some of you don't have any time like that built in your life. Nothing really to speak of at all. And that's what Martha was like. She was like, when I get all this done, if I can just complete all of my tasks, then I'll be able to sit down and listen to Jesus. Look what she said. She said, and she came up, Martha came up. She's so frustrated. I can imagine right now she's just kind of boiling over. She's been letting this build for a while, which is exactly what happens when you don't rest for a long time. Resentment starts to build up, and some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've said these words before. She goes up to Jesus and she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve all alone? So tell her to give me a hand. Again, this reads our mail so much because so many of us, this is exactly how we feel. We can't rest because they won't help me out. If they would just help, if my husband would just pitch in a little bit, if my wife would just pitch in a little bit, if my boss would just understand and listen a little bit, then I could rest. There's some of you, you're sitting here right now and you're thinking to yourself, you're at Glenpool, you're online, you're thinking, you know what, I would rest if I could, but my boss just doesn't understand. And here's what you've done. You've said that rest isn't your responsibility, that rest is somebody else's responsibility, that it's somebody else's job to make sure that you are rested. For somebody else, it's their responsibility to make sure that you're not overworked. But here's the truth. Rest is my responsibility. It's not anybody else's responsibility but my own. Rest is not my wife's responsibility. It's certainly not my kids' responsibility. And get this, it's not even my boss's responsibility. Rest is my responsibility. Nobody's going to look out for your rest like you. It's your responsibility. In fact, why don't we just say, rest is my responsibility? Let's just say it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Rest is my responsibility. Let's say it again out at Glenpool online, everybody together. 1, 2, 3. Rest is my responsibility. Yeah, rest is your responsibility. Nobody else is going to make you do it. Nobody else is going to look out for you and say, you know what, you should take a break. And so often we put our happiness, we put our well-being into the hands of other people. We make ourselves slaves to everybody around us because we say, you know what, I can't be happy, I can't be rested, I can't be who I'm supposed to be until you are who you're supposed to be. And that's simply not true. And it's a miserable way to live your life because you're resentful all the time. Some of you are resentful of your own children because they're making you run around and do all the different things that you got to do. You would never say that. You would never vocalize that. But deep, deep down, way, way back, that's exactly how you feel. Resentful, which is exactly what Martha felt towards Jesus. She was resentful. I wonder if there's things in your life that you're going to have to learn to say no to. For some of you, the difficulty is saying no. You feel guilty saying no. You feel guilty taking time for yourself. It's difficult for you to do it because you feel such shame and such guilt. I'm not exactly sure why you feel that way, but some of us struggle with that. I know that it exists. I've talked to a lot of people about it. This is a real issue for a lot of folks is they just feel guilty saying, I'm going to take a break. I'm just going to push pause. I don't care how the house looks for right now. I'm just going to step back and let things be as they are. I need a break. Many of us feel guilty for doing that, but it's something that we're going to have to do. You're going to have to learn to say no. One of the things that Heather and I have made a point to do in our lives is to say no to certain activities that my kids want to do. My kids are involved in sports. They do some different things, but there's a limit to what we're going to be involved in. I'm not going to run all over Tulsa, running them from this practice to that practice, from this thing to that thing. I'm going to keep a limit on that stuff. And we want our kids to be involved in extracurricular activities. I think that's great that they are. But it can get to a point where it's crazy, where you never have any family time together, where you're a slave to your kids' schedule. Some of you, you're just going to have to learn to put your foot down and go, you know what? We're not going to play that sport. We're not going to be involved in that activity this year. You're just not going to be able to do it. But that's why rest is your responsibility. You can't wait for everybody else to take care of it for you because they won't. It's your responsibility. And then look what Jesus, how he responded to her. He said this, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and it will not be taken away from her. Again, how accurate is this for our lives? We are worried and upset about many things. Worried and upset about many things. It's amazing what's going on in here because Mary is the one who kind of recognized what's happening. See, this is an amazing opportunity, and Martha is missing it. Jesus, the one, the only Jesus, is in their house. He's hanging out with them. You're only going to get so many times where Jesus is in your house. This is the Jesus, not Jesus from down the street. This is the real Jesus. He's in my living room. And yeah, I know the house is not in the shape that it should be, but I'm just going to take a moment and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to pause and I'm going to be right here, right now. So many of us, we're not even in the present moment. You know what I think is amazing? when I go to a concert or any big event where, you might be tempted to take pictures or video of an event, you know what I do? I refuse to take pictures or video. You know why? Because every other flippin' person in the room is experiencing the event through a 4-inch screen. Why not just stay home and watch it on your phone? Because that's what you're doing while you're there. Blows me away. I could go online and just watch all of your videos at the whatever concert because I didn't have to take any because you all took them for me. Thank you. Think about it. We're not actually there half the time. We're watching life through a screen. And we miss so much. We miss our kids because we're not even actually looking at them. We're looking at an image of them on a tiny little screen. We're not even there. Mary was there. She was present. She was in the moment listening to Jesus, not preoccupied with, I got to record this. I got to make sure everything is just right. Hang on, let me set the lighting. Let me get everything just the way that it should be. And so many of us, that's how we live. We're worried. We're upset about many things, and we miss the one thing that really matters. I don't want to come to the end of my life and find out that I focused so much of my time on capturing life that I didn't actually experience it. What's the one thing in your life? What are the things that are necessary? Jesus said there are many things, but one thing is necessary. Question, what's necessary in your life? What's necessary? What do you need? What is it that truly is important? Some of us, our schedules are such that we don't have time for what's truly important. In fact, as we were kind of prepping for this series, I gathered a group of people together just to kind of talk about what we were going to be, this topic, and just see how it was hitting different people. And one girl in the group said something that I thought was so profound, and I think speaks so clearly and should be really convicting to all of us. This is, and myself included. This is amazing. She said that the most important things in her life never make it onto her calendar. That everybody else and everything else is scheduled out on her calendar, but time with God, time with my kids, time with my husband doesn't ever seem to get on the calendar, doesn't seem to make it on the to-do list. There's a lot of other things that we're worried about hitting, crossing this T and dotting this I, but the most important stuff is often missed. Husbands and wives, many of us, we don't spend much time facing each other. We don't really even look at each other. We spend our time together facing one direction, looking at a screen. Watching TV together is not really quality time together. Watching a football game together, guys, is not really quality time with your wife. Many of us, you can't think of the last time when you faced your spouse. All of your interaction with them is just side to side, shoulder to shoulder, pointed at a television screen. What is truly important? What is necessary in your life? And are you arranging your life to get to the most important things? For some of you, it's going to mean going to bed earlier so that you can wake up earlier so that you can have time alone. I know how it is. In fact, I don't know how moms, especially working moms and single moms, I don't know how you do what you do, because you have to work and then you have to come home and work doesn't stop, and there's laundry and there's meals and there's taking care of the kids and there's cleaning the house, and how you get it all done without hiring like 3 or 4 different people, I do not know. But one of the things that I know, and it's the way that my wife works as well, is like many times for women, you wake up because the kids wake up. The kids, in fact, for some of you, especially with small children, it's the kids who wake you up. You wake up with the kids. One of the things that my wife has had to do is just back her schedule up so she can get some time alone, because otherwise, from the moment the kids wake up to the time they go to bed, it's just, Mom, I need this. Mom, I need that. Mom, can you take care of this? Mom, can you help me with that? And then they go to bed, and by the time they go to bed, you're exhausted, and then it's time to start the whole thing over again. And you never get any time with your husband, or you never get any time with God. One of the things that my wife has had to start doing is just going to bed earlier so that she can wake up earlier. She wakes up at 4:30 every morning so that she can be at her workout by 5. She works out from 5 to 6. She gets home after 6, and then she has some time with God alone in the morning before all the kids wake up, and then the kids wake up, and then she fixes everybody breakfast and all that kind of stuff, and then we're out the door and off to school, and the day begins. Some of you are going to have to go to bed a little bit earlier. Maybe it means giving up your favorite TV show or whatever it is that you spend time. I'm just going to tell you, you don't want to come to the end of your life and say, you know what? I didn't get some of the important stuff done, but I covered every season of The West Wing. Man, I was able to make it through that one. Or whatever your favorite show is. You know, again, what is necessary in your life? And are you making those things a priority? Because rest and replenishment is absolutely essential. Now, here's what I want to do to kind of close this service out. And the seat back in front of you, whether you're here or at Glenpool, and if you're online, you won't have one of these, but if you're here in the auditorium or you're out at Glenpool, the seat back in front of you, got one of these cards that just says balancing act. If you're sitting on the front row in any of our sections, the ushers are coming, they're going to pass you one of these cards. These cards have a really important question on them, and it's the question that I want all of us to wrestle with over the next week. If you're in a house-to-house group and you're going to meet this week, I want you to wrestle with this question. And here's the question. What's your strategy for rest? And there's 3 categories on here. We're going to talk about them real quick. There's a space in here as well where you can write down. What I want you to do is to write your daily strategy for rest, your weekly and your seasonal strategy for rest. What's your strategy for rest? 3 categories. The first is daily. What's your daily strategy for rest look like? Do you have a time with God every single day? Maybe it means, like I said a second ago, rearranging your schedule a little bit, but do you have a time where you just get refreshed and recharged every single day? I know what it was like for me for a long time. Was just like, yeah, I want to read my Bible today. And then I'd come to the end of the day and it's like, oh, I'm tired. I'll get it done tomorrow. And then that cycle would just repeat itself over and over and over again. And I found myself going way too long without having any time with God. This is the most replenishing, restorative thing you're going to do in your life is spending time with God. What's your daily strategy for rest? Do you have one? The second category I want to talk about is weekly. What's your weekly strategy for rest look like? Some of you are going to think this sounds really self-serving, but it's not. I know. I'm not telling you this for our own self-interest. Coming to church, attending church, a church that you love, is one of the best weekly strategies for rest that you can have. This is a place where you can come and you can be replenished, you can be restored, you can be lifted up, you can be encouraged. That's part of what us gathering together is all about. Many of us aren't getting the weekly rest and replenishment that we need because we don't really take our weekly strategy for rest all that seriously. What's your weekly strategy for rest? Write that down. There's a little space here. I want you to write that down. Write down a strategy, whatever that looks like for you, but write it down. And then the last thing is this, seasonally. What's your seasonal strategy for rest? You know, we have some guys in our church. I think this is really cool. Where every now and again, every few months or so, maybe once a year, they take a break and they go out to the mountains of Colorado. They climb a mountain together. Just a group of guys. And it's a way they could go out there, turn the cell phones off. There's no cell phone service out there anyway, and just go to the top of a mountain, hang out with some friends, but also get time with God. It's just a time for them to relax and to just have a great time, to just get away from it all for just a little bit. You need that time seasonally, but if you don't make time for it, it will not happen. What's your seasonal strategy for rest? Because you need it. And so this week, that's what I want you to do, is just take some time and write down your strategy for rest, because it's not a luxury. Rest is a necessity. God said we need it. He wired you up for it. It's amazing. Scientists still don't fully understand why we have a need for sleep. Think about it. You'll spend 30% of your life asleep, and scientists are still trying to understand why. God could have made us any old way. He made you to where about every 12 to 15 hours you had to lay down and just conk out and do nothing else. Why did he do that? Maybe he was trying to tell us something. Take a break. It doesn't all have to be perfect all the time. What's your strategy for rest? Let me pray for you. Our Heavenly Father, I thank you so much. You loved us so much that you said, take a break. What a great God. One that would care for us so much that you would mandate rest in our lives. Times where we could just unplug and focus on the important things. Lord, I pray for every single one of the people here in this room, everybody watching at Glenpool, everybody watching online, Lord, that over the course of this week, you would just download strategies for rest, daily, weekly, seasonally. Lord, we need it. I pray, Lord, there's some people here who they're wrestling with whether or not this is really all that big of a deal. Lord, it is a big deal. And I pray you would not let them rest until they have a strategy for rest. Badger them about it, hound them about it until they get it done so that they can be the man and the woman that you've called them to be. It's in Jesus' name, everybody said.